Good evening, everyone. In the last session, we discussed about what is primary key, what is composite primary key, and how to work with generators and how to work with composite primary keys. Then we have seen what is connection pooling and what is the default connection pool available in the data JPA. So today we are going to understand what is stored procedure and how to call that stored procedure by using data JPA. First of all, what is procedure? Procedure means set of SQL queries. Procedure means set of SQL queries. Now, in the Java, we are writing a program with a set of instructions, right? So similarly, if we want to perform some bulk operation, then we can write set of SQL queries by using a procedure. Procedure means set of SQL queries. Now, procedures are used to write the business logic. Procedures are used to write business logic at database side. If we write the business logic at the Java side, Java program should communicate with the database to perform the operation. So if Java program continuously communicating with the database means the performance will be decreased. So to improve performance of the application, okay guys, right? Procedure means a set of SQL queries. Procedures are used to write business logic at the database side. Procedures are used to improve the performance of the application. Procedures are used to improve performance of the application. Procedures are used to improve performance of the application. Are you guys getting my point? Yes, give me 1 minute. All right, guys. Procedure means set of SQL queries. Procedures are used to write business logic at the database side. Procedures are used to improve performance of the application. Now, here we are going to write a procedure like this in the database. When we have a procedure in the database, then how to call that procedure by using data JPA. Here I'm writing a procedure which will retrieve all the records from the database table. Now go to database. Here I'm using MySQL Workbench, delimiter, create procedure, procedure name, get products, select a star from product, and delimiter. I'm creating the procedure in the database and I want to call that procedure. So what is this procedure is doing is, it is retrieving all the records available in the database table. So this is the name of my procedure. So how to call this procedure by using our application? Okay, file, new, Spring Starter project. I'm creating a new application, 10 data JPA stored procedure application. Stored procedures. Click on next, MySQL driver, data JPA, next, and finish. I'm creating a project. Now, in this project, we need to specify database properties. I'm using my application.yml file in which our data source properties are available, with which database it has to communicate. Those properties I have configured in my YML file, username, password, and all. All right. Now I need to create one entity class to represent the data. So I have a product table, product ID, product name, product price available. So to represent that table data, I'm using one entity class. Let me create new class with a name called entity. I'm taking it as a product. All right. Now here, private integer product ID, private string product name, private double product price. Now, to represent this class as an entity class, I will be using one annotation called @entity. Right? Table name and class name both are same, so no need to map anything. Okay. This one is a primary key mapped variable. I'm using @ID. So let me write setters and getters for these variables. Setters and getters I'm writing for these variables. Perfect. Public class product, product ID, product name, product price. This is the entity class and it is having @ID, that is a primary key mapped variable. All right. Next one, I need a repository to perform DB operations. So I'm creating one repository interface. That is my product repository. Click on finish. To make our interface as a repository interface, we need to extend the properties from JPA repository. What is the entity? Entity is the product. Primary key type is an integer. Earlier, when we take a composite primary key, the type is account PK. But today there is only one primary key in the table. That primary key is also integer based. So directly I'm specifying my primary key type as a integer. Product repository, extending from JPA repository, product integer. This is my entity. This is entity primary key mapped variable data type. Now, I want to execute a stored procedure. To execute a stored procedure, what we are going to do here? It is simply like, you remember in the JDBC we are having callable statement concept. In the JDBC we are having callable statement concept. What is the purpose of that callable statement concept? In the JDBC we have statement, prepared statement, and a callable statement. What is the purpose of that callable statement? Callable statement is used to execute stored procedures. So similarly, how to execute that stored procedure by using JPA? Simply, I'm writing a method, public. I want to get all the products. My procedure will return all the products. So I'm representing list of product, get all products. This is my method. This method is abstract method. There is no logic. There is no logic in this method. Now, when I call this method, I want to execute my procedure available in the database. In the database, already I created a procedure which contains some logic here, begin and end, start point and end point. Now, when I call this procedure, it is executing that, it is returning me all the records which are available. Now, in order to call this procedure, we can write simply @query annotation. We can write @query annotation, value is equal to call the name of the procedure. What is our procedure name? Get products. Call get products. Now, here I'm going to specify native query equal to true. I'm going to specify native query is equal to true. So that means it is a native query. It is not a HPL query, right? So it is a stored procedure database dependent. So in order to call stored procedures from the data JPA, we need to write simply a custom query and you need to specify call procedure name. Specify that native query is equal to true. This is a native query. Now go to our start class and call this method. First get the repository object. I'm getting the repository object as application context. So I can say it as context object. With this context object, we are going to get the repository bean, context dot get bean of product repository dot class. Product repository dot class. So with this, we are going to get product repository. Once we get the product repository, let me call a method product repository dot get all products. Product repository dot get all products. So now we are going to specify all the products here. Products dot for each. Products dot for each. So here what we need to do is we need to print that data. System dot out double colon println. System dot out double colon println. I'm trying to print this data. So am I executing a query or I'm calling a procedure? Guys, if you observe, am I executing a query or am I calling a procedure? I'm calling a procedure. How to call the procedure? By using call keyword. Call procedure name. It is used to call stored procedure. I'm giving native query is equal to true. Now let's run our program. Here I have a start class. Inside this start class, I'm getting product repository bean object. Using that repository, I'm calling this method. Now run as boot application. See this? Am I able to call the procedure? Yes, I'm getting the two objects. So those two objects, two-string format is printed, hash code in the hexadecimal format. I don't want that. I want to print the content of the object. To print the content of the object, I'm overriding toString method. Right click, run as boot application. Can you see, guys? Are we able to retrieve the records by calling a procedure? Is my procedure executing? Is my procedure executing or not? Yes, my procedure is executing as expected. So do you know how to call a procedure by using data JPA? Simple, @query, that's it. Okay. So this procedure which I have given is get products. So now calling the procedure using JPA repository. Calling procedure using JPA repositories. Very simple. You need to create a procedure in the database. That procedure name you need to configure in our JPA repository. By using custom query, we can call. Call is the keyword which is used to call the procedure. And remember, whenever we are calling a procedure, we need to set native query is equal to true. We need to set the native query is equal to true. Sample procedure to retrieve data from product table. Procedure to retrieve data from product table. So like this, you can create a procedure to retrieve data from product table. Calling procedure using JPA repository. Perfect. All right. Can we call procedure from HQL? No, sir. Procedures are database dependent. We can't call the procedure from HQL. We need to call that as a native SQL. Call procedure name. That is the query to call the procedure. We should specify native query is equal to true. Perfect. All of you clear with my point? Yes. Okay, perfect, guys. So as of now, what we understood in our data JPA. So we understood what is Spring Data JPA. What is Spring Data JPA? Hibernate versus Data JPA. Now do you got the clarity? Hibernate versus Data JPA. So now, if you go for Hibernate, do you have a mechanism for find by methods? Without writing any logic, can we perform operations in the Hibernate? Without writing our own logic, can we perform operations? No, we cannot perform operations without writing our own logic. But in the data JPA, are we writing our own logic, or it is providing predefined methods? It is providing predefined methods. So what is Spring Data JPA? Spring Data JPA is used to develop persistence layer in our application. Spring Data JPA is used to develop persistence layer in our application. Hibernate versus Data JPA. In the Hibernate, we need to write our own logic to perform DB operations, but in the Data JPA, ready-made methods are available to perform our own operations, to perform DB operations. And we discussed about Spring Data JPA repositories. Spring Data JPA repositories. One is CRUD repository. Second one is JPA repository, paging and sorting. CRUD repository, JPA repository, paging and sorting, query by example executor. So there are several interfaces are available, and they have provided some methods to perform our operations. Okay. And we discussed about what is entity and annotations to map. What is entity? The Java class which is mapped to the database table is called as entity class. Annotations to map Java class to DB table. @entity, @table, @ID, @column. Like that, there are several annotations are available to map our Java class to database table. So what is entity class? Any Java class which is mapped to database table is called as entity class. Any Java class which is mapped to database table is called as entity class. So we have seen some annotations @entity, @table, @ID, @column annotations to map our Java class to the database table. And we discussed how to develop application using data JPA. How to develop application by using data JPA. And we have seen CRUD repository methods. We have seen CRUD repository methods. And we have seen JPA repository methods. Okay. And we discussed about CRUD repository versus JPA repository. CRUD repository versus JPA repository. CRUD repository provided several methods to perform CRUD operations with the database. Save method, find by ID, find all, save all, count, exist, delete by ID, delete all. Like that, they provided several predefined methods to perform the operations. JPA repository also provided some methods to perform the operations. What are the methods are available in the CRUD repository? Same methods are available in the JPA, and additional methods also available in the JPA, like sorting functionality, pagination functionality, and query by example functionality concepts are available in the JPA repository. Okay. And here we understood what is pagination, how to implement pagination. Pagination, sorting, query by example, constructing the query dynamically based on the data available in the entity class. Dynamically, we can create the queries to retrieve the data. For that, we are using query by example. And we discussed about working with the find by methods. Working with the find by methods. You no need to write the logic. You no need to write the logic. You no need to write the query. You just write the method. Based on your method name, JPA will prepare the query and will execute the query. Based on the method name, JPA will prepare the query and JPA will execute the query. Method names are very important. Based on the method name, queries will be constructed by JPA. For that, we can use find by methods. If you want to execute your own query, then we can go for custom queries concept. Custom queries using @query. Custom queries using @query. And we discussed calling stored procedures. Calling stored procedures using data JPA. So as a native SQL query, we can call stored procedures also. And we discussed about timestamping, generating, inserting the data for create a date and update a date concept we have discussed. Create a date, update a date. When the record is inserted, then created date should be populated. When the record is updated, then updated date column value should be populated in the database. Timestamping. And we understood soft delete versus hard delete. Soft delete versus hard delete. Soft delete means making the record as an inactive record. Hard delete means deleting the record permanently from the database. Soft delete and hard delete. And we discussed primary key. Primary key. And for the primary key, we discussed generators. Then we discussed composite primary key. Composite primary key, connection pooling. We discussed about connection pooling. All right. So first one is, what is data JPA? Data JPA is one approach to develop persistence layer in our Spring-based applications. Data JPA is one of the part in the Spring framework, which is used to simplify persistence layer development in our applications. Earlier, Hibernate is available to develop the persistence layer, but by using Hibernate, if you want to develop the persistence layer, you need to write a lot of code. You need to write the logic to insert the record, update the record, delete the record, retrieve the record. You need to write your own methods. You need to manage transactions in the Hibernate. But when it comes to the data JPA, everything is automated. Ready-made concept is available. Everything is automated. Ready-made methods are available. You no need to write the queries. You no need to open the session. You no need to create the transaction. Nothing is required. It will be taken care by data JPA. Developing the persistence logic using data JPA is very easy when compared with Hibernate. Here, what are data JPA repositories? Data JPA provided several repository interfaces to perform our CRUD operations with the database tables. CRUD repository, JPA repositories are the examples. Then we discussed about what is the entity. The Java class, which is mapped to the database table, is called as entity class. What are the annotations we have used to map our Java class to the database table? Several annotations we use: @entity, @table, @id, @column. Writing table column annotations are optional. If you don't write a @table, it will consider class name as a table name. If you don't write @column, it will consider variable name as a column name. We developed several applications by using data JPA. Data source properties we can configure in the application.properties file or application.yml file. We will create an entity class. We'll map to the table. We'll create a repository. By using repository methods, we can perform operations. CRUD repository, having several methods like save, save all, find by ID, find all by ID, and find all, delete, delete by ID, delete all by ID, delete all, count method, exist method. Several methods are available in the CRUD repository. JPA repository also having the methods. Then what is the difference between CRUD repository and JPA repository? Using JPA repository, we can perform pagination, sorting, query by example. What is the pagination? The process of dividing total number of records into multiple pages is called as pagination. In my table, there are 1000 records available. Displaying all the 1000 records in a single page does not look good. So that's why we will go for pagination. Pagination is the process of dividing total number of records into multiple pages for display. What is the sorting? We can specify the sorting order by class. I want to sort the data based on the salary, based on the name, or based on the address. Like that, you can do the sorting also. Query by example. Based on the user input, I want to filter the data. if user select address, or if user select gender, if user select ID, if user select location, department, wise I can select the data. For that we can go for query by example. Whatever the data available in the entity, with that data, query will be prepared and will retrieve the data. When you are implementing search criteria with the filters, like we have seen Flipkart filters, how mobiles are getting filtered. When you have such kind of filter conditions in the requirement, then going for QBE is very important. Next one, find by methods. Already we are having predefined methods to perform the operation, but if you want to perform some select operations with non-primary key columns, then you need to go for find by method. Find by name, find by age, find by gender and location. Like that, based on the method name, you can construct the query in the runtime and you can execute it. By using find by methods, we can perform only select operation. Find by methods cannot be used for insertion or updation or delete. Okay. Next one is custom queries. If you want to execute your own query by using JPA, then you can write a custom query in the interface, repository interface. To execute that custom query, we are going to write @query annotation. In that query annotation, we'll write the query which we want to execute. Okay. Then how to call the stored procedures. And one more thing I have explained here, HQL versus SQL. One more concept we discussed, HQL queries versus SQL queries. HQL queries versus SQL queries. And we discussed about what is the dialect class. What is dialect class? HQL stands for Hibernate Query Language. Those queries are database independent. HQL queries cannot be executed in the database directly. HQL query should be converted into SQL query for the execution. Who is responsible to convert HQL queries to SQL queries? Dialect class. If you are using Oracle database, Oracle dialect class will be available. If you are using MySQL database, MySQL dialect class will be available. If you are using Oracle database, Oracle dialect class will be available. If you are using MySQL database, MySQL dialect class will be available to convert HQL. When we go for HQL, maintenance of the project will be easy, but performance will be degraded because every HQL query should be converted into one SQL query. Then what is SQL query? SQL queries are nothing but database dependent queries. We can execute them directly in the database. Performance wise, SQL is better because conversion not required. Directly they will execute. But maintenance wise, HQL is better. What is a dialect? So dialect class is responsible to convert HQL query into database understandable format, database SQL query. For every database, a dialect class is available. Okay. When we add the driver, Oracle driver dependency, Oracle dialect will be available. When we add MySQL connector, MySQL dialect will be available to do that. How to call the stored procedure? What is a procedure? Procedure nothing but a SQL program. Set of SQL queries will be available in a stored procedure to perform some operation. To write the business logic in the database, we are going to use procedures. Okay. Now, to call that procedure, we are using @query annotation. Next one, timestamping. In the database, in every table, I want to maintain created date and updated date. What is the purpose of created date and updated date? Created date and updated date columns are used to analyze the data. Created date and updated date are used to analyze the data. After 1 month, if I check my database table, I should be able to figure out which record is inserted on which date, which record is updated, how many records inserted in the last month, how many records inserted today, how many records inserted in the last year. I should be able to perform some analytics on the data. For that, this created date, updated date will play important role. Next one, soft delete versus hard delete. Hard delete means directly deleting the record from the database. Once we perform hard delete, that record will be deleted permanently and we cannot get that record back. Okay. Now, soft delete. Soft delete means we are not going to delete the record. We are going to update the record as inactive. If you go for a hard delete, we can't get that record back. If you go for soft delete, we can get that record back whenever we want. Soft delete means we will maintain a active switch column. We will make the switch as Y or N, depends on the requirement. Primary key. Primary key is a constraint, which is the combination of unique and not null. Primary key columns should not have the duplicate data, should not have the null data. Okay, primary key is a constraint, unique plus not null. Unique plus not null. Perfect. Unique plus not null will be available when we go for primary keys. It is not at all recommended to ask user to enter the data for the primary key. It is not recommended to ask the user to enter the data for primary key because users may enter duplicated data. Users may enter duplicated data for the primary key. So that's why always we need to generate the primary key value by using generator concept. Auto generator, table generator, sequence generator, identity generator. There are several generators are available which are used to generate the value for primary key. When we go for MySQL, we will use identity generator. When we go for Oracle, we will use sequence generator. If the generators are not satisfying your requirement, then you can go for a custom generator. We can develop custom generator and we can configure that custom generator also in our entity class. Okay, now next one. If you want to use single column as a primary key, that is fine. You can use generator to generate the value. Suppose I am having more than one column as a primary key, which is called as composite primary key. How to represent a composite primary key? To represent a composite primary key, we are using annotations embeddable and embedded ID. Embeddable and embedded ID annotations we are using to work with composite primary key. Making more than one column as a primary key is called as composite primary key. To work with the composite primary keys, we are using these annotations, connection pooling. So instead of getting the connection from the database every time, we are going to use connection pool to store the connections. When my application want to communicate with the database, connection should be ready to use instead of getting the connection from the database. Every time, if you are getting the connection from the database to perform the operation, application performance will be degraded. So that's why Data JPA provided Hikari connection pool as default connection pool. Hikari CP, Hikari connection pool. That is the default connection pool that we are getting in the Data JPA. Whenever we add Data JPA starter in the pom.xml, immediately it will check for the data source properties. With the data source properties, that connection pool will be created. When we want to perform the operation, that connection pool, connection we are going to use, JPA will be using that connection pool internally to perform the database operations. Okay. Now, when we are working with custom queries using JPA, custom queries, select queries, non-select queries, right? Here we have used two more annotations. One is modifying and another one is transactional. We used two more annotations. One is modifying, another one is a transactional. So if you are executing a select query, then transaction is not required. If you are executing a non-select query, then transaction is required. At the rate modifying, at the rate transactional queries are required to execute a non-select custom query. If you use predefined methods like save method or delete method, then JPA will take care of the transactions. You no need to begin the transaction. You no need to commit the transaction. If you go for predefined methods, then JPA will take care of the transaction. When you are writing your own custom query to perform non-select operation, then you need to specify these two annotations. Then only JPA will take that operation. At the rate transactional, at the rate modify. That means my query is representing a DML operation, data manipulation. It may be a insert or update or delete. For that, transaction is required. So like that, custom queries also we have executed by using those annotations. And I have given video for Spring Boot profiles concept. Spring Boot profile. In the real time, we will be having multiple environments. Dev environment, SIT environment, UAT environment, and production environment. For every environment, configuration will be different. Database properties are going to change. So we are going to maintain profiles and we'll activate a particular profile when we are deploying the code into particular environment. Right. How to work with Spring Boot profiles concept, I have given a video. And how to develop custom generator, I have given video. How to develop custom generator. I have shared a video in the group. How to develop a custom generator. For example, I want my primary key column value as Ashok IT1, Ashok IT2, Ashok IT3 like that. So if I want to develop a custom generator, how can we do it? And how to tell our entity to use custom generator? By using generic generator, you can map your custom gen. That means if predefined generators are not satisfying your requirement, then you can develop your own generator that is called as custom generator. We can configure that custom generator in the entity so that it can use that generator to generate the value for primary key. I hope you guys gone through Spring Boot profiles video and a custom generator concept video. Guys, did I cover all these topics? Did I cover all these topics in the data JPA? Come on. The quick summary, what we have learned in the data JPA so far. People are asking how to work with in-memory database. I will explain that in the Spring Web MVC. How to work with in-memory database. H2 database we can use. In the Spring Web MVC module, I'm going to show you how to work with that. Okay. In-memory database means we no need to install any database. Spring will provide the database for our application. That is called in-memory. I will explain in-memory database in the upcoming classes, guys. Just quickly review the 25 points that we have seen. Next, we need to understand how to perform join operations in the data JPA, how to join two tables data, how to retrieve that data, foreign key relationship, how to represent that we are going to discuss in the next sessions. Okay, guys. I'm going to explain how to work with the foreign keys, how to work with the joins when the two tables are having a relation, how to fetch the data with a join query by using JPA. That concept I'm going to explain. Okay, fine, guys. So tomorrow Shivaratri festival, so no class. Next Sunday no class. Monday, Tuesday we are having the classes. Monday, Tuesday I'm going to show you how to work with the foreign keys, how to retrieve the data from two tables by using data JPA, how to work with the join queries by using data JPA, one to many, many to one, how to do that. We will discuss that on Monday and Tuesday. And again, guys, Wednesday and Thursday, I will be on the leave. Wednesday and Thursday, this 22 and 23, I will not be available. I can't take the classes on those 2 days. So I have personal work. I can't take the classes on 22 and 23. So we have classes on 20 and 21st. 20 and 21st, we are going to discuss the foreign key, how to work with joins in the data JPA, how to retrieve the data from two tables when there is a relation, how to insert the data into two tables when there is a relation, how to map this by using entity classes, how to represent the relation in the entities, that we are going to discuss on Monday and Tuesday. So Wednesday and Thursday, I will not be available to take the classes. All right. Yeah, rollback in the transaction also I will show you when I am working with the join queries. Right? When I am showing you tables which are having a relation, at that time I will show you how to handle the transaction also, how to roll back the transaction by using data JPA concept also I will explain. Okay, two things that I'm going to discuss. One is join queries and how to roll back the transaction by using data JPA. That part also I'm going to discuss on Monday and Tuesday classes. All right. After completion of this data JPA, we are going to start Spring Web MVC module. Mostly in the next week, our Web MVC module is going to start. The 24th or 25th, we are going to start our Spring Web MVC module. All right, good. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining. All of you, wish you happy Shivaratri. Enjoy the festival, and you have 2 days of time to practice all the concepts that we have discussed so far in the Spring Boot and data JPA. You got some breathing space to do the practice. Again, we will meet on Monday. Monday, we will work on join queries. Okay. Thank you guys. Good night. I will upload these notes into portal. We'll see you on Monday. Happy Shivaratri.